Blockchain Show is a podcast that demystifies cryptocurrencies and distributed ledger technology.
Hello, welcome back. You're listening to The Blockchain Show. I'm your host, Ethan Kinderconnect. Today, we're going to talk about a topic we haven't really covered in years, education, decentralization. Joining me today is Nadav Zeimer. Nadav, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure here, too. I think that we've got a lot of interesting topics to cover, but before we get into it, tell us a little bit about yourself and how your work ties in to the blockchain.
So I am a former software engineer, got a degree in physics and did software engineering in the Valley in Palo Alto for a few years before I went into education. And in education, I was a physics teacher and ran a robotics program before becoming a high school principal. The blockchain piece, I was just watching Bitcoin and blockchain technology, kind of in touch with all my old buddies in the industry. And at some point, a little thing happened in my head because there's a lot of similarity between finance and high school credits as stores of value, different kinds of value, academic capital versus financial capital. And so at some point, I just said, what if there was something there? And I started to explore it and talking to experts and ended up writing a book. And now we have an app coming out this fall that is going to implement the ideas in the book. So just one thing led to another, and I'd love to talk more about the details.
Yeah, maybe tell us a little bit more about how that came to be.
The first thing, there's this thing happening that high school credits, public high school credits, have kind of already gone to zero. They've inflated them. Every administration messes with the metrics that it looks like their graduation rates go up. And in the end, the kids now, if you put your name on a worksheet, you get a point kind of thing. The standards have gone so low that we're warehousing kids, but we're not actually teaching them, let alone teaching them something useful for this digital world. And then the one thing that we use for assessment is standardized testing, and just that word standardized, an industrial concept. And so for myself, it's not my work, it's a huge group of us that have been kind of looking for better education. I'm a data person. I'm a data-driven principal, very heavy on data as a physics person. And so we're looking for what's high-quality educational data. It really has to do with project-based work. And we kind of ended up at this thing that, well, if a student can upload a video or a podcast or code, or even do a live event and show some video from it, that could end up being the basis for academic capital, a measure of value generated in an academic environment that is much more meaningful than standardized tests. And so we explored that. And like I said, it just kind of, we kept assuming there would be a problem and kind of showstopper and that this wouldn't work out because of some detail. And the further we dove into the details, the more we said, this looks like it's happening. And the funny thing is, once I started sharing with people, I now am hearing educational experts around the country saying, oh yeah, we this is happening no matter whether you do it or somebody else does, this is just happening. And so we can talk more about that. But yeah, I don't know if I answered your question. I probably wandered off.
No, it brings me to a good point here. There was a school nearby that we really wanted some of our children to go to, and we actually approached the principal asking if we could kind of, barter, but offer a podcasting program in exchange for some tuition because it was a private school, very expensive. And I think it was just a little bit too early. I don't know. This was before podcasting was a huge, culturally accepted thing. And, obviously that didn't quite go over. So I'm curious to learn how your transition into education, and I know you founded a nonprofit on like hyper local radio and podcasting into the curricula. So tell me some more about that.
So I've been making videos and podcasts with students for about 18 years, and we just saw something happen when that red light goes on the camera. The best student, their best self, kind of shows up. And so we said, that's interesting. We kind of started playing with it. At first, my wife would come to the school and just film students, at first randomly, then as kind of acknowledgement for students that had I had a very particular data system and students that made progress week to week, even if they were still failing their classes, but had made a turn. In that early part of their turn, we were using it just to interview them about what the change was and kind of helping the community rally behind them. And that just grew and grew, ended up having films in the Tribeca Film Center, and a $500,000 recording studio built in the school. And we just saw how you take a student who, I work in a community of schools that are transfer schools. So we take kids that have been kicked out of other schools. And so some students can't copy a sentence from one piece of paper to the next, but they cover up that illiteracy with intelligence. And so if you talk to them, you'd never guess that they can't read ever. And when it's time their turn to read from the textbook, they go to the bathroom. And so we would hand them a microphone, have them do a podcast, and they would be the superstar academics, and they'd never been seen like that in a school. And then the reading and writing came, but it was for us, it just like that, one student at a time, trying to serve students. We just the digital. I think digital pen and paper, podcasts, videos, digital art. We started to see that students really naturally connect with projects based on producing those kind of products rather than worksheets or standardized tests or the humdrum that they were used to, because they didn't access that information well.
I love it. Podcasting is one of my favorite mediums ever invented, and it's almost like a hugely important thing that I don't know if it gets the respect it deserves. It's almost like a new revolution in thought and sharing ideas, almost like the Gutenberg press. But how many people can just listen compared to how many people can just read? Not just podcasting, but YouTube. So there's so much potential there. And I really like how you're able to work with these students. And, you talk about the light coming on, and they kind of, maybe a light comes on inside their eyes too. So it's just, it's a really, maybe it's like a bridge to another way to connect to their selves.
Absolutely. And there's much more to it than that, I think, in the ecosystem as an educator. I mean, that's from the student perspective. From the principal perspective, we're spending a lot of resources to, put kids in these boxes with bells that they move and security guards. And now with COVID and social distancing, I've been doing this for 20 years, and all of a sudden in the past 6 months, in the past 3 months, suddenly there's this interest and demand for, some other form of educational data. And here we are now, all of us that have been doing this are saying, yeah, finally. But it's funny that it came through a pandemic. I would have never predicted that. But for a high school student now in this, high school students are not coming to online classes. So there's a crisis, because if they don't give them the credits, they will have a backlog of students doubling up on at the same time that their budgets are getting cut, at the same time they're supposed to social distance. So there's kind of, I think they're starting to give away credits more than they already were. I mean, you could already graduate high school without knowing how to read or write. So like I said, we're suddenly building an app and things are taking off. And I totally agree with you about podcasting. Podcasting is special. And there's something really special about the community and about the activity of podcasting. It's a little, YouTube and social media, people are shooting videos and collecting media. It's kind of on the fly, spontaneous. Academic content is revised. You do multiple revisions. It's researched. It's refined through editing. And so academic capital is not like social media or social capital. It comes from the work and the sweat equity and the frustration tolerance that goes into showing you have work ethic and you can produce a high quality piece of content. And podcasting lends itself to that naturally much more easily than video does.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. Heard a lot about schools lately, especially around reopening and budgets, and there's just so much going on at the same time. And so I really like your approach of like a digital media centered kind of approach to school reform, because what better time than now to reevaluate how we go about essentially raising the next generation of people. So I'm curious to hear your take on post COVID-19. How has this changed your what you're trying to work towards? Yeah.
It's so, the Committee of 10 in 1892, the recommendations they made it would look familiar today. So education really hasn't moved at all. And so we have to be a little skeptical if anybody says that anything's going to move, because people have said it before and it doesn't happen. But COVID seems to be providing this unique opportunity. And what I'm talking about is high school only. I'm very focused, and might even only be 11th and 12th grade. I'm thinking of somebody that would have taken an AP course. Now they can either take that AP course and take a test, which maybe nobody will be able to take tests anymore. I don't know. But if they could, we're providing an alternative saying you can get an AP credit by producing a video or producing a podcast or writing code if it's mathematical or technical. It's a big change but it really facilitates. So let's just walk through the day of what it would look like. If one of our credits, one of the credits that I propose in the book encompasses a full month. One credit is kind of defined as 1 month full time of work. So 4.5 weeks times 40 hours a week. So 180 hours of work. And so that's multiple revisions. Like let's say each week you do a revision and you get feedback and you kind of by the end of the month have a product that you can upload. So that's 180 hours. Currently, New York State, 108 hours is an annualized credit. So already each one of our credits has more hours of work built into it. And the credit you can click on and see the video or podcast that was produced. You can verify the quality yourself. But on top of that, if you just do 1 credit per month, and let's say September and June are taken for wrapping up and celebration. So between October and May, you have 8 months. And so in high school, you can get 8 times 4, 32 of these 180-hour credits. Whereas in the traditional industrial school, where the bell rings every 42 minutes and you have to switch textbooks and go to a different room, they only get 22 of the credits that are only worth an hour, 108 hours, right? So even if a kid in high school now only had to work on 1 piece of media per month. So that's going deep. That's focusing. That's using real research, for historical credits, for history credits, you would do real research and analysis, right? And go out and get your own primary sources, interview politicians, go to the protest instead of being in the school building because we can't have you in the school building all the time because of social distancing. So now students are out in the field and then coming back to edit or planning interview questions, and they can focus on 1 project every month and still earn a hell of a lot more credit than they did with the old only brick and mortar way. So there's a real opportunity to deepen the experience of learning in high school. And it's so important at that time in our lives. It's such a critical moment in our lives where we're trying on our new values that are different than our parents for the first time. And this gives such a way to process and deepen our understanding and our use of the tools that we will need to function in a digital world. And let me just say one thing about that. A digital world is one where our attention is monetized, and our attention right now is getting sucked into screens. A digital native education system is not more screen time. It is not fewer teachers. Quite the contrary. It's a lot more people acting as teachers, just the way the parents are now, to make sure that students know how to master their attention to do quality, to produce work, right? Because that's who's going to succeed in the workplace of tomorrow. It's not somebody who just punches in, punches out, and gets paid. That doesn't happen anymore. It's about focusing our attention and dealing with the frustration tolerance. And so that shift to a school system that develops a young person's use of their attention, I think will produce much more meaningful experiences in high school and solve some of the problems that we're facing right now with credit inflation and social distancing.
Very well said. I mean, high school is a very important part of every person's life. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be such a positive impact. Speaking of credits, with this being the blockchain show, it makes me think right away about how this ties into blockchain technology. And I know you wrote a book, Education in the Digital Age, How We Get There. So talking about what we've been talking about so far, I'm curious just to learn a little bit more about how the mechanism of transforming like you mentioned, academic capital in the way that credits are stored and used in education through blockchain.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with people that say that most blockchain applications haven't happened yet, right? So again, we should be skeptical. I think Bitcoin is really the only network that is proven. Certainly anybody that is an engineer in the blockchain space would tell you what I'm building in education does not require blockchain. Now, let me explain why I think it does. Bitcoin is a network. The difference between a network and a platform is a platform has multiple networks that have some interface, a search bar or something, right? So Uber is a platform because there's a network of drivers, a network of riders, and there's a search tool in between them to help them find each other. And platforms are much harder to disrupt and much more powerful in digital corporations than are networks. The way platforms tend to work is you give away something free on one network, and then you charge on the other network, right? So we get all this free stuff to get our attention focused on the screen where they want, and then the ads pay for, sucking our attention there. Now, what I say as a Bitcoin enthusiast is, what would it take to make Bitcoin a platform, not just a network, so that Bitcoin in a digital world remains strong? What I'm suggesting is that separate from this education, I'll connect them in a second, but Bitcoin needs to give away a free digital cash that they manage that's inflationary, that's got different characteristics, that forces people to settle onto the digital gold that is Bitcoin. That's supposed to be slow and it's supposed to be expensive because it protects the security. But if those same machines can give away digital cash to drive adoption, then all the stores that take that cash at the end of the night have to settle on Bitcoin, right? And so Bitcoin gets all that settlement transaction and ends up being kind of the corporate settlement side, and I think Lightning Network as well. So that was kind of a thought that I had, and I was exploring with people separately. And then we started saying, well, what if that happened? What would the monetary policy be of this new digital cash? Right now, monetary policy, 60 cents on the dollar goes to the military-industrial complex, right? And it goes out from the top down. So there are these big pipes of money from the central bank, and they have to give big chunks out. They don't have time to give out little individual. But in a digital world, you can go onto people's phones and give them, $1,000 a month or whatever. So you can start in a digital where it's not physical dollars or gold, you can start decentralizing distribution. So if we had a cash that needed to be inflationary because it was cash, you don't want people to hold it, then that inflation, the printing of new cash every year, that's the connection to education. I say, well, if the Bitcoin community does agree and we do create a decentralized version of digital cash, and it's not Facebook and it's not centralized, it's not China, if we manage to do it in a decentralized way, the way we did for digital gold, what if you issue new cash as a basic income just to students who are the most successful in the digital economy, those who have earned the most of these credits, who have generated the most academic capital in high school, they then become eligible for this basic income that's paid to them for 20 years, equivalent of like $1,000 a month in their wallet. That would pump money into the economy in a very different way. And I think that doing it through education, if you got your basic income every month after high school from Bitcoin, you would be pretty damn loyal to Bitcoin. And if you're a good coder, you would make sure that the coding for Bitcoin is like the infrastructure and the, doing good while doing well. People would get rich, but also be improving education internationally. And I think that for Bitcoin would be a home run.
Absolutely. Just to further a little bit more about this topic of academic capital, something that I don't know if we were recording earlier, but we were talking about greed and how we can use it to our advantage during this period of economic inversion. Explain that to me, because it's a little bit unclear.
Sure. I just deeply believe that if greed does not drive your platform to grow, if you have to assume that people won't be greedy for it to work, you're dead in the water, right? So I'm always looking for incentives in a system to make sure that everybody is incentivized. Like, look at what people are incentivized to do. Right now, politicians are incentivized to water down credits so that their numbers grow, right? That's the incentive structure. And then they negotiate with the unions to minimize the number of hours because they think that a union teacher has to be with the student every moment, right? And so all these adult concerns and interests drive the incentives of current high schools. And we're looking at how can we create new incentives to use greed to drive education toward deeper learning and more meaningful experiences. So the academic capital, if we develop it as a blockchain system, would bundle together a block of academic work every 3 months. So it would be a block every 3 months. Now, there are transactions happening using that cash, and I still call it funny money. At the beginning, it would be total funny money, right? People would be getting useless money in their wallets. And if enough people get those, enough students graduate and start getting that money, they might advocate for it to be traded. But if it has a clear exchange value through Satoshis, like if it has a definite inflationary schedule of how much each one is worth in Satoshis, and it gets less and less over time, it would be very easy to trade it because the value would be predefined. So we're just looking at how can we use money to incentivize deeper and more meaningful learning. And so the way we do that is we create these things called gates. A gate is a repository of academic, pedagogical information that a student and a teacher needs. So the teacher isn't writing the curricula. They go there. Let's say there's a Black Lives Matter gate, or there's anything, a video gate for National Public Radio about some local issue, wearing masks. They want to get youth voices. So they set up a gate. They say it has to be this long. These are parameters. And here are some resources to help guide you through the process to make this type of audio, this type of podcast. Then the students pay the same way they pay right now. Students pay to upload a piece over the gate so that it can be graded and get a credit or no credit. Just like they do now for an AP exam. They pay for the exam, and that pays the people to score the exam. And the reasons we have the students paying the fee for a credit is right now, if you look at Facebook, the advertisers are paying the fees, so the system is designed to take care of the advertisers. by having the students pay the fee for the credit, the focus of the system, the incentive of the system is to take care of the student. And we can talk a little bit more about, social justice and making sure that doesn't become a barrier. So just continue with the academic capital, how you build academic capital. Each time a piece is uploaded and is approved for credit, that's a unit of academic capital. And some of the gates will be local and not, within one school, within one community of schools, but some gates will be adopted by the College Board or by Harvard University, right? They'll get national standing accreditation so that one of those credits actually gives you college credit or gives you an AP score. And then once every 3 months, the top work gets bundled together in a block. It's a different kind of blockchain because it's once every 3 months, and it's just managing the academic capital, not the funny money that's driving incentives in between. But it packages that, and anything in that package, in that block every 3 months, then for every 3 months, so for 20 years, they get a disbursement of that cash for the inflationary schedule as part of their award for making it into the block. I don't know if it's a little bit out there, but it makes sense financially, and it even if it's a long shot to have a cash invented on Bitcoin and all that. That's kind of just my dream to convince the Bitcoin community to do good and do well. Scrap all that, and we just set up a high school credit on a blockchain linked to these digital files and storing academic capital, like the Fort Knox of student revised, refined, researched work. Then you have this growing store of students' videos teaching each other students academic content where they are incentivized through this basic income disbursement, even if it's not tied to Bitcoin or anything else.
Yeah, I can see the potential of just, how this is going to disrupt everything. And I imagine it's kind of hard to explain this to a lot of people, especially like you mentioned, politicians. And unfortunately, a lot of things can take a long time to get to where they need to go. So how have you dealt with kind of obstacles and educating the adults into, how important this change is and what needs to happen?
Yeah, it's incentives. So this will not happen from within the system, right? No Department of Education in their right mind would stick out and lead this. They will adopt it last, right? But Uber didn't ask the taxi industry if it was okay for them to come decentralize, car hire. And it's the same thing. If we can create a tool that has incentives for students, for teachers, for principals, right? And for these people I call catalysts that help the students with the digital video editing piece so that teachers don't have to know that technical side. If the incentives make sense, people will start using this because in COVID, they're going to be desperate for anything. And if this works, that's where we prove it. I don't want to talk to people about it so much. I want to finish developing this app, which we'll have out soon, and give it to my colleagues. No, I am the DOE, right? I am a high school principal. I'm the person that is going to be the obstacle. So I know that perspective well and what the concerns are. But I also know that what people need right now, what they're hungry for right now in this COVID crisis, and what works with students based on 18 years of doing it. And there's something that, clicking those two pieces together, we just saw, holy moly, we have an opportunity here to create a new type of high school credit that students will love to do because they're out of the building. They get support on the technical side, and we should talk about the incentives. Why would somebody coach a student to edit video, and what are the safety issues? There's a bunch of things to unpack there. But if you look at the politicians then adopt it like they're all using Uber now as if it's nothing, right? They don't even think it's weird to get in a stranger's car to go somewhere, right? So once it's mainstream, they'll adopt it because it's mainstream. The trick is to make something so useful that it becomes mainstream because people are hungry for it and there's demand for it. So we're starting a minimum viable product that should be out in September, and then we're just doing a proof of concept only in Harlem and the South Bronx. Very limited proof of concept. If it takes off the way we expect it to, we will then be off to the races and just focused on taking care of teachers, especially, and taking care of principals and taking care of students. Right now, the credits are defined by politicians. We're switching it so the credits are defined by teachers, and teachers then can opt out of teaching to a test. And we can go through each player. I haven't gone through the incentives in detail, but I can go through the incentives for each one of the players, and you'll be very quickly convinced, like, holy schmoly, if I was a teacher, why wouldn't I do this? It'd be crazy not to download this app and give it a try. Yeah.
Would you mind just giving us a short overview of each incentive, a little more?
Yeah, I'd love to. So let me talk about these catalysts. Catalysts don't meet with students in person. They provide remote support for video editing, for anything on the digital literacy side. So making podcasts, making videos, making images. They the student chooses a gate. Let's say they find you imagine whatever gate it is, a video gate about a certain skill that looking into research of the protests that are happening now. So they get to go attend protests and interview people, something like that, about police brutality or whatever it is. So they choose that gate, and then they get matched with a catalyst, with somebody who's going to coach them. Now, if that person successfully coaches students, and each time they coach a student, when they upload a video to the gate, it's accepted for credit, meaning that the student uploads it and the catalyst says, I agree, this is ready for upload. If the catalyst, every time they say it's ready for upload, the gatekeepers agree and it's approved for a credit, that catalyst shows that they understand what a credit, how to evaluate something for a credit. And they can then become one of the gatekeepers. And the gatekeepers, if you pay $100 to have your work graded at that gate, the gatekeeper is the one that gets that $100 to evaluate a 15-minute video. So there's an incentive for them. So you can have people, I know a bunch of my former students who want to do education, but they're not sure that they want to get a degree. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of commitment. They want to see if they work well with students. So they can coach students to make these videos while teachers are working with the academic side. And if they're successful, in short order, the gate will say, hey, we need more graders. More people are applying to this gate. We don't have enough people to evaluate the work. You can get paid $100 a pop. And so they can have a side income while they're bakers or doing theater or doing whatever they're interested in. They can have a little side gig of scoring student work for credit and making money that way. And then the teachers, so let's step over the teachers. The teacher takes on one of these projects and says, well, I have no idea how to make a video. Well, no, that's taken care of with a catalyst. The catalysts are incentivized to do a great job so they can become gatekeepers. And the teacher then just gets support so they can focus on the research, the writing, the frustration tolerance. The teacher doesn't have to write any curriculum. They're just focused on working with human beings on multiple revisions to produce a good product, right? So they're working on the human side that we really need, how to focus student attention. Now, the students, if they don't like taking tests or they're not good at time tests, that's already one incentive. Another incentive is the basic income and funding money that they get and the economics that happen around that. Another incentive is that they just get to focus on one project a month, and they get more credit than they would have otherwise, right? It's a way to go deep and have an interest, engagement with educational content. And there are probably some things that I'm missing. Even a testing company, right? They have incentives to adopt this as an alternative to their tests right now because people can't meet in person to take tests. But they also get money as these uploads come. If they set up a gate for one of their tests, they get paid just like they did for the test. And they get the positive PR of going digital and ending standardized testing. And they get all the videos that come in that they can use for marketing purposes, right? So there's there's incentives for public media companies, for teachers, teacher unions. Look at their incentives. They have paid teachers in their ranks, so they can offer free gates. They can offer their credits for free because they already have the paid teachers, and those paid teachers are giving them union dues every month, which they can use to even do a better job. So the unions have a huge head start over everyone else if they choose to use this tool. And then they can also, a forward-thinking union could go to their members and say, hey, we're going to negotiate in the next contract that you never have to teach to test again, because that's educational malpractice, right? And so the teachers union can start fighting for students again and saying, hey, no more tests. We're going to help you do meaningful work and focus your attention. Teachers shouldn't be writing curriculum. They should be experts in working with students. And in this system, only in terms of the catalysts, only those that are successful producing results, high quality content with students are the ones who get paid to grade. Those that think they're going to be great teachers. Right now, you think you're going to be a great teacher, you pay university to get a credential, you get a job as a teacher, you suck with kids. Well, you're in the union, too bad. You're stuck there. In this system, if you don't produce results with kids, you don't make it from being a catalyst to being a gatekeeper, right? So that's just a bit, and there's a lot more I can go into, but and you can tell me if you want to go more in any direction.
Yeah, it was really good stuff, and there's something that I think you've just really, near perfected is just realizing human drive and what incentivizes us. And just to keep it a little bit topical, I remember, like a month ago, there was a lot of unrest, particularly in large cities. And I read an article you wrote about, bias, just as a human innate quality, like everybody has these biases. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about, how and why bias can make us money, and also how digital code can be used to write anti-biasness.
There are so many directions to go in there, but let me just start from making the bridge from what we're talking about in education. How can you call it critical thinking when a group of students is with only people from their socioeconomic class and there are no perspectives to challenge the same thinking that all their parents have, right? If it's going to be critical thinking, you have to have diversity in the classroom. And that's the same reason that we don't have sex with people in our families, right? Because the gene pool has to stay diverse to stay strong. It's the same reason your financial portfolio manager says diversify your portfolio, because that is what keeps you anti-fragile. So to make something anti-fragile, you need diversity and diversity of thought for critical thinking in our schools. Now, if we can acknowledge that we are biased, and we stop, I go to the park. I have a park I'm looking at right now at the window, out my bedroom window. And I go there with the kids. And I have one girl who's African-American and one girl who's Japanese, my two daughters. They're 10 and 3. And they'll see my Japanese daughter playing in the swings. And without ever just seeing her, they'll see, man, she is so smart, right? They've just seen a Japanese girl and they have this bias for Asian people, right? They'll see my brilliant little 3-year-old African-American girl, and the first thing they'll say is never, she's so smart, right? Those biases are part of us. It's okay. And if somebody says that right now, it's kind of taboo to say, oh, did you notice what you just did? But if we can laugh about that, and that's what comedians do, right? That's what entertainment does, is it exposes those very human mechanics that we have, and so we can all laugh at them. The more any human being that can be self-aware and notice those biases, that's the kind of authentic content that people love to watch. Those are the popular YouTubers in a digital content age. Those are the people that are going to get a large following because of their authenticity. I think that's the only reason Donald Trump got elected, is because he said things that other people don't say that were true, mixed in with a lot of things that weren't true. But yeah, so I think that there's a lot of money for America. I lived in Japan for a very short time while I wrote the book, and I have family in Finland and in Argentina and in Israel. And being in America, where we have this diversity, if we can own it as our birthright, we are way ahead of the world in being digitally advanced because of that diversity. But we have to stop being scared of it and stop denigrating it, and just own it as part. We are all biased. If we weren't biased, we would have no way to take in the information around us. We have to have screens and filters, and they come from our culture and how we grew up. And there's nothing really wrong with it unless we decide there's something wrong with it. I'll stop there. If there's a direction you want to go in, I think that, let me just pause to hear where you want to go, and we can talk in a few different directions. Yeah, no, I like where you're going. I think it's almost like a lot of people are afraid to voice how they truly feel, and I see a lot of manipulation in the media, and maybe people are being told how to feel. So I like what you said about kind of owning innate biases, and we don't have to be defined by them. We just can just realize what it is for what it is. There's a great potential for change because, like you said, diversity, it really does make us stronger. Exactly, and bias, being able to own that we are biased, especially if we're policymakers, we don't have to act on it. And it's, Ibram X. Kendi has this whole concept of being anti-racist. I like saying anti-bias because that includes gender roles and other things. But to be anti-bias, you have to intentionally become aware of your biases and share them so that you don't act on them. And the bias that is the most pernicious in society, and this has been shown in research, isn't the extreme KKK kind of violent bias. That's terrible. And we have a history of that in America. But I think the bias that really hurts us is having a slight preference for our kind. I have a slight preference for my daughter over somebody else's daughter, right? That's natural, and nobody would think that's crazy. It would be pathological to claim otherwise. But that slight bias, if we're not aware of it, will have us always hire and give the apartment to or close the deal with somebody that is a little more like us. And I think it's really important in a digital world, if we want to have big user bases and speak to diverse communities, we have to put that aside and get to know how other people think so that we can include them in what we're doing. And if we don't do that, we're just not going to be digitally relevant because digital is global, right? And there's this whole thing of democracy and choice that if you can become aware of that machinery for a moment, and it's fleeting moments, but when we can become aware of it and share it, not only does it make people laugh and get brand loyalty and whatever else, but it also lets us make choices that are harder for the algorithms and the top-down mechanics, advertising, to put us in a box and predict our actions and manipulate us. And that's also true for our democracy. It's harder to manipulate us when we're all a little bit different and we have different positions. When we all can be grouped together with one common, commercial that speaks to all of us, we're very easily manipulated. So there's a lot of, like you said, we become much more resilient and much stronger the more we can own our biases. And that's not easy work, but I think America's much further ahead if we choose to continue down that road than a lot of countries that just don't have the diversity and haven't had it for many years. What I was saying before, I kind of lost my train of thought even in that answer, the microaggressions, right? That slight favor toward those who are like us that's built into us from, millennia of development is what we really have to watch out for, because if you're on the other side of that and the people hiring are always white and you're not white, it can be pretty oppressive to always have a little bit smaller chance of closing the deal or getting the apartment or getting the job.
Yeah, so true. And last episode I recorded, we were talking about virtual private networks and how they were, this particular company, Mysterium, was helping to end digital discrimination, something I didn't even know was a term, but, say that some companies didn't want to offer free services to different countries because they were less likely to subscribe. And I imagine that there's a much wider range of topics we could cover there. Just to kind of get back into the education side of thing, do you think digital code and, talking about anti-bias, is this going to help? Because I see like blockchain technology just in general is like it doesn't really care who you are. It's the very nature of it being decentralized is like, it's a very powerful tool. And, there's sometimes it's more anonymous than others, but in education, it seems like it could be a very powerful tool to kind of, mow over or take down barriers that, you mentioned interviewing, but, maybe like tests. And I know that we haven't really got to standardized tests yet, but, college acceptance, like maybe you can try and glean what I'm trying to get at here.
Yeah, so the blockchain is at the cutting edge of digital trust, right? Without the blockchain, we would never send somebody money that we've never met, unless we really, right? That concept of not having to trust a central party and be able to do peer-to-peer interactions is really the cutting edge of what you said, kind of building diversity into code. And the same thing is kind of user reviews. That's another thing. It's been shown that people that have 4-star and user reviews on something like Airbnb, their race doesn't matter as much because those reviews actually have more of a weight than our assumptions about somebody because of the way their name sounds. So learning how to build digital tools that let us interact with confidence, that trust people that are not in our social affinity group, is allowing interactions and trade globally that has never been possible before because we needed to trust a third party. And so in education, we would have to intentionally design the credit system to be anti-biased, and we'd have to design it to evaluate its own bias and correct for it when it sees that it's acting in a bias or implementing bias of its users. And so, for example, what if the only way to get the basic income award is if in your city, every zip code had a credit approved, right? So if in your city, you're getting all these college credits, these AP credits by making videos and you're loving it, but then you get together as a student, you say, well, let's look around the whole city. Let's look on the system and see which zip codes are not yet represented. And let's make sure that we figure out how to get credits generated in those zip codes, because if we do that, if every zip code is represented, that's when we get the basic income. So you incentivize kids to organize themselves to get all, and if you use geography as a proxy for diversity, knowing that we live near people that are similar to us, right? So if every zip code is represented, we assume that will include a more diverse set of videos uploaded than if just one neighborhood is uploading videos. So that's an example of how you can design a credit system that incentivizes diversity so that the communities that ensure that the content they're creating is as diverse as their population then are incentivized with a basic income award. That kind of intentional anti-bias design into digital code could be a powerful incentive structure so that students are considering the diversity of their content. So if you look at the content on the system of this, revised, refined, edited research content, and you only see white people, first of all, they're not getting the basic income, but it says something about that, that environment. And so there's action. I think kids themselves would figure out how to get to schools in the zip code that isn't producing content and figure out how to work with them. But I'm leaving that up to the kids to figure out because the incentive is for them to get the basic income. And I think students would be much more harsh than anybody in evaluating what is diversity, what is not diverse enough. So putting in their hands, I think they are way ahead of us in understanding this diversity issue as students that grew up in a digital, global, immediate exchange world. But again, it's a matter of measuring the diversity, how diverse the videos are that are uploaded, and having students evaluate that, and then having an incentive for those that work through the difficult conversations to get everybody producing content, not just the rich white kids.
Right. Yeah. That is awesome, man. And this has been a really good talk so far. I know we could go a lot further in detail, but I encourage anybody listening to get the book, Education in the Digital Age, How We Get There. And maybe just tell us where people can go to learn more and get involved.
Yeah, so once we have the app out, obviously that's aware, and we're figuring out what the name is going to be. I call this DNA Credits. That's not a very marketable name. But you can go to principlez.org. And if you just search hashtag DNA Credits right now on any social media, you'll find some of my stuff. Watch out for us, because very soon this will be out, and all we need is people to see if there's an incentive for them to use it, and then use it if the shoe fits.
All right, yeah, Principal Z. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure talking with you today.
Likewise, such a pleasure. Thank you so much.